To the budget, the total bungling and the untruths. Oh, by the way, I'll have just something broken about Prince Harry that I'll have later in the show. Delicious. But so much of the budget today, included handouts to compensate for government mistakes, like handouts for the electricity bills it's made worse with global warming policies, handouts for renters and first home buyers, for the housing crisis the government created by importing more than 1 million immigrants, and so on. But the Treasury today said, don't worry, we're at least now cutting this flood of immigrants.
We want to make sure that we manage down net overseas migration and do that in a considered and a methodical way, which recognises that there are genuine economic needs for migration as well. You won't solve, for example, a housing shortage without sufficient workers, mostly by training the workers, but also there's a role for migration. And so we're managing it down to more normal levels.
To more normal levels. Well, Chalmers' budget says it's now going to slash net immigration to 260,000 people a year. 260,000, which is a couple of 100,000 less than it was. But 260,000 sounds a lot, and it's in fact still nothing like normal. It's still way, way, way above the normal immigration levels before the pandemic, which was a third of that. 1/3 of that. Joining me is Leith Van Onselen, co-founder of Macro Business and a former Federal Treasury official. Leith, thanks for joining us. Labor now saying, oh, we're going to cut immigration to 260,000 people a year. There are actually two questions about that. And the first is this: do you even trust it can and will do that?
Oh, not a chance, Andrew. I don't trust them one bit. The reason why I don't trust them is before the last federal election, Labor said they were actually going to run a lower immigration program if elected. And instead, what do? They held the Jobs and Skills Summit in September 2022, and they used that as an excuse to ramp immigration to levels that we've never seen before. And as a result, we got 1.1 million net overseas migrants in only 27 months. So no, I don't trust Labor and immigration. Their track record is poor. The two largest periods of immigration in Australia's history have come under Labor governments. In 2008, under Big Australia Kevin Rudd, and surprise, surprise, under the current government.
Well, the second question is this: even if you did trust them, is cutting immigration to 260,000 over the next year enough? Is this what Chalmers claims the normal level?
No, absolutely it's not. It's 260,000 is big migration. It's not normal migration. Now, just to put some numbers around that, in the 60 years following World War II, Australia averaged net overseas migration of less than 90,000 a year. And over that entire 60-year period, post-World War II, Australia only exceeded 150,000 net overseas migration in 2 of those years. And even in the decade before COVID, which was labelled Big Australia, Australia averaged less than 220,000 net overseas migration. So no, Andrew, 260,000 is big migration. It's not normal migration.
So how many people are we going to get over the next 5 years?
Well, according to the budget, we're going to get 1.8 million over the next 5 years. That's not just net overseas migration, that's total population growth. But as we know, that is driven by net overseas migration. And that level is obviously not going to, it's going to ensure that Australia remains short of housing. It's going to remain short of infrastructure. It will put pressure on our water supplies, our power supplies, and our overall living standards. And it's also important to note, Andrew, that the Centre for Population released its projections in December, so only a few months ago. And it was even more aggressive. And it predicted that Australia is going to add 4.1 million people over the next 10 years. So that's basically a Canberra a year for 10 years. So where are all those people going to live? That's the question.
Well, let me go back to that graphic, which is fascinating. Driven largely by immigration, we're going to have 1.8 million people over the next 5 years. The population of Adelaide and Canberra combined. That's what we've got to build. A city's as big as that, essentially, over the next 5 years. Victoria getting the most, more than 500,000 in just that one state alone. How does this influx of so many strangers this fast help this country?
Oh, of course, it's not going to help the country. It's going to ensure that this rental crisis that is, at obscene levels. Just last month, or this month, I should say, PropTrack released its rental affordability report, and it said that rental affordability is at its worst level in history. Well, how are you going to help that when you're going to fire hose in an extra 1.8 million people, 1.4 million of which are going to land in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane? How's that going to help the housing crisis? Obviously, if we've got a supply issue, You don't fix that supply issue by ramping up demand and pumping more people into the supply restricted market. That's just going to make the situation worse. This is an absolute failure from the federal government.